Hey, you guys, welcome to Burgundy Blue Commentary, where we talk about what we want to talk about when we're ready to talk about it. And today we're actually regarding Black August. So today's August 1st. Black August has August because I think it's only 46 years that it's been noticed as a holiday. Am I correct?
Not a holiday, but it's been commemorated, I guess.
Commemorated. Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks so much for being here, Gardis, and thanks for guiding us through. I didn't know it was several chapters in the Black August study, the situation. I don't know what to say, but I didn't know, you know, it was several chapters. So thanks for breaking it down for us.
Okay, no problem. Okay,
So
you want me to go
yeah.
ahead? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What does Black August mean? Maybe we could start there.
Okay. I'll start. I'll start with this year's presentation because um, Black August is something of significance uh, to our people when it comes to resistance, because sometimes we have to fight against this system that undermines us, as people. And we see it locally, we see it nationally, and we also see it globally. So, uh, in retrospect, when we talk about Black August, and for some reason I can't change my slide. Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we hear you just fine.
Okay. It looks like my slide froze.
I'll take it down until.
Hold on. No. Okay, it's back up again.
Okay.
Right. Okay, maybe not. All right. Give me 1 second here.
Take your time. Hello, Douglas. Hello, Brandon. Thanks for joining us this year's Black August discussion. We had one last year and it was great. I was so grateful to Gardis for actually sharing that with us. And I did see the movie Black August after we had that discussion. And also, hopefully, this time he referenced a couple of books for us to check. Because one of the gentlemen, was it George Jackson?
George Jackson, yes.
George Jackson, yeah. So, yeah, I'm excited to be able to go over Black August again this year because I knew nothing about this commemoration. Juneteenth was new for me in my adult years. And then to know we had Black August, that was pretty cool.
Yep. Okay, let me try this again.
Take your time. Hit the like button if you guys are here. George and Jonathan Jackson.
And Jonathan Jackson, yes, indeed.
I'm just gonna pull their picture up.
Okay. I'm sharing my screen. Can you see it?
Bringing it back up. There you go. Go right ahead.
All righty. So Black August. So this is going to be the second year I kind of do this, but this time we're going to be doing it in particular days, particularly 4 days. And I'll get to it real quickly. So to recap, as Berg said, we did a Black August video last year. And I'll just do a quick recap of what we kind of talked about. The history of Black August goes back to the late 70s. It's a political education movement that talks about resistance and revolution within the context of certain people who are the purveyors of the Black August movement. As I said last year, it's a commemoration, a reflection, and observance of historical resistance against racist social structures. One thing that we have to understand that Black August is not an extension of Black History Month. It's mostly for those who remember, who fought and died for basically kind of like the liberation of Black people. because the thing about Black August, it's not just a history lesson. It's more than a history lesson, but it's political education. So we have to understand that perspective. Even though history is tied into this, the purpose of this is not to just regurgitate, historical events, people, places, and times, but to clearly understand how our ancestors, how people in the past resisted, and how do we get that spirit of resistance back into our generation. So when we're talking about the origins of Black August and who are the central figures of the Black August movement, we have to talk about W.L. Nolan, three guys: W.L. Nolan, Katari Gordon, and George Jackson. These three men were incarcerated in the 60s in the California state prison system. They met at San Quentin prison, and they were leaders of a political movement which politicized people in the prison systems. Many call them political prisoners, but they basically were people who tried to educate those within the prison systems about their rights inside and outside of the prison systems. Because the thing about it is that when we're talking about the 60s and the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, and even before that time, when we had Jim Crow, there was large white violence against Black people. When you're talking about lynchings, when we're talking about bombings, when we're talking about all of this stuff, and then when the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement got into the view, basically Black resistance started to come up. People started to fight, not just violently, but there was a resistance movement against the racial social structure that this country was seeing, and also across the world, because several African countries were liberated by their European they liberated themselves from the European colonizers, like Algeria. So when we're talking about the start of this movement, 1969 is when W.L. Nolan circulated a petition and filed a lawsuit against the California prison system, articulating inhumane and racist conditions. And then on January 13th, the fight broke out in the Soledad prison yard between his organization, the Black Guerrilla Family, and the Aryan Nation. Unfortunately, Nolan and two of his colleagues, Cleveland Edwards and Alvin Miller, were actually killed. None of the Aryan Brotherhood was killed. The guard, basically, who was responsible for that, was acquitted of murder. George Jackson protested, and a riot broke out in January 1970, where a guard was killed, and they tried to charge George Jackson and two of his comrades, Flea Drumgo and John Clisette, for the murder, and it was first-degree murder. And these are the people who are called the Soledad brothers. Jackson was convicted of first-degree murder and basically sentenced to life in prison with time in solitary confinement. Now, during his trial in August 7, 1970, his little brother Jonathan Jackson tried to kidnap the judge and demanded that they free the Soledad brothers. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't well planned out. Jonathan Jackson and his comrades didn't get far, and they were shot up, along with the judge that they kidnapped as well. The Angela Davis ties into it, because Angela Davis was good friends with George Jackson and Jonathan Jackson. They traced the guns to Angela Davis. She was on the run. She was the first Black woman to be on the FBI's most wanted list. She was eventually captured. However, in a trial in that next year, in 1972, she was actually acquitted by an all-white jury for attempted murder. So she was freed. She was basically freed after that. George Jackson who spent his entire life in prison when he was like 18 years old. August 21st, they claimed that he smuggled a gun into the prison system, into his prison cell into his solitary confinement prison cell in San Quentin, and decided to shoot up the place, where he was shot dead. But the investigation was kind of shoddy. How did Jackson get the gun into prison when he was in solitary confinement? And there was necessarily no chain of evidence. This also resulted in another prison riot where several inmates and guards had died. And then the last of the three gentlemen, Qatari Gardin, on August 1st, 1978, he was playing football in the prison yard where he tripped and suffered a severe head injury. There was a pole that was sticking out of a wall where he hit his head. Now, the problem was that he basically was, never medically treated, and he died in medical neglect. But we'll get into that in a couple of minutes. But the Black August movement not only centered around these three guys and several other people who were associated with the prison movement, but it also talked about events in August that were very important to Black resistance. When you talk about slave rebellions, the Haitian Revolution and Nat Turner's Rebellion, when you're talking about the urban revolts, we talked about Ferguson and the Watts riots that happened in August, and then even the nonviolent resistance movements, like the March on Washington that happened in August as well. These are certain things that were incorporated later on in Black August teaching when we talk about it. So the thing that I wanted to get into was there are Flea Days. They call them Flea Days because they represent the events of Black August that centered around George Jackson, W.L. Nolan, and Qatari Gardin, and also people who are associated with them. These are events that commemorate them as martyrs of the movement when we talk about it. So the first Flea Day, which is August 1st, and this is why we're doing this broadcast today, basically kind of deals with the last of the three gentlemen who who led the prison movement, and this was Mr. Qatari Gardin. Now, Gardin was actually an activist in the 60s in San Francisco. He was in prison for about 11 years. Not sure, and I couldn't look up what he went to prison for. But Gardin was actually politicized before he got into, prison. So, but the thing about Gardin was because of the fact that he was under Jackson and Nolan, who were very, educated people, they were very well-read people. Jackson, who was an author who wrote, the famous book Blood in My Eye and Soledad Brother, he learned under him. So when his two comrades had passed, he took the mantle, and the California prison system was very sadistic because, from my understanding, there were people who were trying to get him killed. There were actual guards and officials who were trying to pay inmates to kill Gardin in prison. They were paid to kind of set him up. So as I was referring to his incident on August 1st, 1978, Gardin was actually playing football in the prison yards of San Quentin, where he basically tripped and hit his head on a pipe sticking out the side of a brick wall. Now, that sounds kind of gruesome, but that sounds like a very, very serious injury. So Gardin was actually taken to a prison infirmary where he was actually held for several hours. And then after several hours, the doctors in the infirmary couldn't help him and suggested that he be transported outside to the public hospital. Well, the prison system was like, well, we don't have time to transport him, and we don't have the security to get him out of here right now. So after about several more hours, and Gordon is basically fighting for his life, a decision was finally made. Okay, let's get him out to Ross Hospital in Marion, California, where they did a brain scan on him. And they did the brain scan and found out that he had significant brain injury, and it was life-threatening. Well, he sat at Ross Hospital for several hours, and finally they transferred him to San Francisco General, where he ended up dying. So Gordon basically is a person that was assassinated not in the typical JFK Martin Luther King way of, having a gunshot, but he basically was assassinated through medical neglect. For him to be transferred into several infirmaries and several hospitals and not get any treatment sounds like medical neglect to me. I'm not sure if his family sued, the California prison system, which what I would have done, or the hospitals that took care of him, because it basically seems like that they didn't want to treat him and they wanted to let him die. Because of the fact that he was revolutionary in his own might, in his own sense. But what's also interesting is, recently we got word that there were book bans that were going on. I guess this presidential administration decided they don't want any of those woke books. They don't want any of those critical race theory books in the libraries, and especially in the prison systems. Now, what's interesting is the prison system started purging their libraries years ago, years before Donald Trump even got there. Matter of fact, from my understanding, because of all of the stuff that has happened in the 60s and 70s, in the California prison system, from my understanding, anybody who has any literature on Black August, any inmate who has any literature on Black August, can be subject to the hold in solitary confinement. That's how serious this stuff is in the prison system, because obviously, if you give a bunch of prisoners a bunch of books, and the right books, and they start reading the right literature, they might start changing their politics. And what's more dangerous than somebody who has committed a crime in society? What's more dangerous is a person who realizes that whether they're behind bars or not, they're in a prison and they're looking to fight their way out. And I think this is what these three gentlemen had tried to start in this movement, because they realized that the people outside are mentally and sometimes spiritually no different from the people inside. They're trapped within their own areas. They're trapped within their own politics. Sometimes they're trapped within their own religion. And revolution is not something that is obtainable to certain people, because revolution takes a certain spirit. It takes a certain heart to do this. And it takes a certain level of education to plan revolution as well. So this is what these gentlemen were trying to do. Now, when we expand outside of the Black, the core of the Black August movement, which revolved around the political prisoners that I had mentioned, I talked about some of the riots and revolts and the birthdays of the people that were in August. Now, last year I talked about the Milwaukee riots. That was one of my examples of the Milwaukee of the riots that happened basically in August. And I use this one because I think this one happened between the between the first Flea Day and the second Flea Day, which is the next Flea Day will be August 7th. And I believe this one started in July 31st and then ended in like August 2nd. So Milwaukee is an interesting city because it's only 90 miles from Chicago, but it has basically a lot of close ties and a lot of close history to Chicago because, just like with Chicago, Milwaukee is a very, very segregated city. And I think even to this day, Milwaukee is predominantly Black. And the Black people of Milwaukee, most of them are in poverty. So when you're talking about Milwaukee, it's a very interesting city, being close to proximity to Chicago, but also too sharing a same type of history with segregation, with redlining, with poverty, and all the stuff that that happens. And there was a documentary on HBO a couple of years ago called Being Black in Milwaukee. I'll check that out later. But it was a documentary that followed a couple of Black youth that in the Milwaukee area. And it was very heartbreaking. That documentary was heartbreaking because they talked about their experiences in Milwaukee as Black boys. And it was heartbreaking. In the documentary, it said Milwaukee was one of the worst places to raise Black children. And I never knew that. But I mean, I've only been to Milwaukee, maybe 2 or 3 times, and I haven't, toured around the Black neighborhoods in Milwaukee. So I think next time I probably might do that, just to see what's going on in Black Milwaukee. But the thing about it is that it fermented due to the fact that in 1967, there were not just riots in Milwaukee, but there were riots all over the place. And this was what historians label as the long hot summer. 1967 had one of the highest rebellion / race riot rates in recent history. 127 urban rebellions in 1967. 11 of them were in the month of August. Majority of them sat in July because July is the hottest month, but August had 11 of them alone, which included the Milwaukee rebellion. But there was, like I said, in 1967, you're talking about around the same time as the formation of the Black August, movement between Jonathan Nolan and Qatari Gardin, all being in prison, all studying political revolution and stuff like that. You're seeing this foment around the Black community in this country. And so you talk about these rebellions. August, I think the rebellions in August there was one in DC, there was one in Rochester, and several other places, went up in flames. Well, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was the president at that time, had assembled something called the Commission on Civil Unrest, which was nicknamed the Kerner Commission, because it was headed by the governor at that time, the governor of Illinois, Otto Kerner, who is in that picture right there. Otto Kerner was the head of the Kerner Commission, and he was tasked to do a 426-page report called the Kerner Report, which was published in March of 1968. Now, this report basically was a report that Lyndon Baines Johnson wanted to know why all these Black folks and these niggers, tearing up cities across the country. And so he was tasked to, interview sociologists, economists, all kind of people about the conditions of Black folks in this country. And sure enough, the report said something in a sense that we probably know through experience, our ancestors had knew through experience. And basically, the report gave a conclusion of this. It says white racism is essentially responsible for the explosive mixture which has been accumulating in our cities since the end of World War II. What white Americans have never fully understood, but what the Black can never forget, is that white society is deeply implicated in the ghetto. White institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, and white society condones it. That is the conclusion of the Kerner Report. But basically, it talked about how the conditions of Black people, when we're talking about poverty, when we're talking about police brutality, when we're talking about redlining, when we're talking about actually migration, because remember, during this time, we're still at the end of the Great Migration from the north, from the south to the north. And all of these factor in because of institutional racism. And when the report was released in March of 68, obviously a lot of white people were like, oh, it ain't our fault. We didn't do it, But these systems that they maintain, which their ancestors built, was part of why Black people started to riot. They started to wake up. We have this whole anti-woke culture going on thing. And I know wokeness has been compromised because originally wokeness was about fighting racism, but now wokeness is about every other thing. And in some ways, I can't understand why people speak out against wokeness, because it's not at its original core, where in the 60s, where this tagline of wokeness had came through, because of the fact that we wanted Black people to understand that they are under the system of racism and they needed to fight it. So the Kerner Report basically, gave us something that Black folks, had already knew. Now, what's interesting is Otto Kerner, after he left the governor's seat of Illinois, he became a circuit court judge, which he basically had to vacate because he was arrested for mail fraud. Interesting. Another Illinois governor who who was arrested.
Wow.
Yep. So another Illinois governor in jail. Fortunately, he didn't do that when he was in office, but you never know what he was doing when he was doing in office. Last year I talked about the Montgomery Riverboat fight, where in Montgomery, Alabama, there was on that riverfront in Montgomery, and the ferry was unable to dock and so the Black security guard attempted to ask the white family to, hey, can you move the boat so we can dock the ferry? Well, the white family got belligerent and said no, and decided that they wanted to get the security guard out of here because, he's causing too much trouble and these niggers don't tell us what to do. So the white family decides to attack the Black security guard. Well, the ferry had majority black people on there, Black men in general. What they did was, some of them actually got out the boat. They docked somewhere else, got out the boat. One brother swam across because he couldn't wait for it to dock. So once the ferry had docked on the other side, the gentleman got out and they started to fight the white family that was attacking the Black security guard. And sure enough, most of the white family got thrashed because I think people in Alabama are tired of Black folks getting attacked by white mobs, and they had enough. And this was in 2023. So that spirit of, those memories of white mobs attacking Black people, that still was ingrained in them, even though some of them probably never seen a Black person lynched or anything like that. But I'm pretty sure their parents told them about it. Some of them probably had relatives who probably had that were lynched at one point or another in their family history. So they still remember that. And when they saw that, something triggered them and decided, hey, we got to help this brother. And that's exactly what they did. When we're talking about birthdays, one of the birthdays is the respected writer, James Baldwin. I almost called him Dr. James Baldwin, even though he has the intellect of a doctor. But one of the greatest literary scholars that this country has seen. He's written several books on social issues. I think I remember talking about he debated Malcolm X, and that was a very great debate. For a person to stand toe-to-toe with the intellect of Malcolm X says something in that regards. But I wanted to show this video, and I hope it plays. This was from a movie that was released maybe about a couple of years ago, maybe about 5-6 years ago, called "I'm Not Your Negro," and it was basically a documentary about James Baldwin. And this was a clip when James Baldwin was on the Dick Cavett show. And there was a professor who came on the Dick Cavett show who wanted to debate Baldwin about racism in America. And I think this was in like the 60s or something. But let me see. Hopefully you can hear the sound.
I would like to add someone
to the sound
group here. Professor Paul.
Yes, we hear it great.
Weiss, a sterling professor of philosophy at Yale. Were you able to listen to the show backstage?
A good deal of it, but then I was behind the rostrum here.
Yes.
So I heard only some of it.
Did you hear anything that you disagreed with?
I disagreed with a great deal of it. And of course, there's a good deal I agree with. But I think he's overlooking one very important matter, I think. Each one of us, I think, is terribly alone. He lives his own individual life. He has all kinds of obstacles in the way of religion or color or size or shape or lack of ability. And the problem is to become a man.
But what I was discussing was not that problem, really. I was discussing the difficulties, the obstacles, the very real danger of death thrown up by the society when a black man attempts to become a man.
All this emphasis upon black man and white does emphasize something which is here, but it emphasizes or perhaps exaggerates it, and therefore makes us put people together in groups which they ought not to be in. I have more in common with a black scholar than I have with a white man who's against scholarship. And you have more in common with a white author than you have with someone who's against all literature. So why must we always concentrate on color or religion or this? There are other ways of connecting men.
I'll tell you this. When I left this country in 1948, I left this country for one reason only, one reason. I didn't care where I went. I might have gone to Hong Kong, I might have gone to Timbuktu, I ended up in Paris, on the streets of Paris, with $40 in my pocket on the theory that nothing worse could happen to me there than it already happened to me here. You talk about making it as a writer by yourself. You have to be able then to turn up all the antenna with which you live, because once you turn your back on this society, you may die. You may die. And it's very hard to sit at a typewriter and concentrate on that if you're afraid of the world around you. The years I lived in Paris did one thing for me. They released me from that particular social terror, which was not the paranoia of my own mind, but a real social danger visible in the face of every cop, every boss, everybody. I don't know what most white people in this country feel, but I can only include what they feel from the state of their institutions. I don't know if white Christians hate Negroes or not, but I know that we have a Christian church which is white and a Christian church which is black. I know, as Malcolm X once put it, that the most segregated hour in American life is high noon on Sunday. That says a great deal for me about a Christian nation. It means that I can't afford to trust most white Christians, and certainly cannot trust the Christian church. I don't know whether the labor unions and their bosses really hate me. That doesn't matter, but I know I'm not in their unions. I don't know if the real estate lobby is anything against black people, but I know the real estate lobbies keep me in the ghetto. I don't know if the Board of Education hates black people, but I know the textbooks that give my children to read and the schools that we have to go to. Now, this is the evidence. You want me to make an act of faith, risking myself, my wife, my woman, my sister, my children, on some idealism which you assure me exists in America, which I have never seen.
I never
Mm.
And that was the great James Baldwin. He read that guy the Riot Act.
When I tell you he did, because he came out there like he was going to tell James Baldwin something.
Yes, exactly. And he got read the Riot Act, and that was great because that guy was a professor at a university, and he was highly intelligent. And Baldwin, yeah, he obliterated him in that particular speech. So that was great. I love that. But that's what made James Baldwin so special. But also too, like I said, he knew about resistance. He knew about study. So that was that right there. And he knew about fighting. You know, fighting is not always about, you know, physical contact. You know, fighting is fought on all fronts. When you're talking about wars are fought on all fronts. It's not necessarily fought with guns and tanks and knives and, you know, other weapons that, you know, that kill people, because wars can be fought with words. Wars can be fought, you know, with economics. And sure enough, many of us in Black America there's a war being waged on us, especially economically, especially when you're talking about the prison industrial complex, where, you know, majority of the people in the prisons are majority Black people, even though we only constitute what they say at the most 20% of the population of this country. So lastly is Chokwe Lumumba, who was an interesting figure because Lumumba is a member of what they call the Republic of New Africa, which is a Pan-African organization, has been around for years. The government kind of labels them as a quote unquote terrorist group because of the fact that, you know, they're basically pro Black people, even though I don't remember them bombing any buildings or anything like that. But, you know, that's another story. But Lumumba, and I can't remember what his original name was, but when he joined the New Republic of Africa, he changed his name, and he got the name Lumumba after Patrice Lumumba, who was the prime minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, who unfortunately was assassinated by his partner through the Belgian authorities because Patrice Lumumba wanted to nationalize a lot of the resources in the Congo. And the Belgians was like, oh no, we get those for free. And Patrice Lumumba was like, no, you don't. You need to pay us. So what do? They paid his friend off, Joseph Mobutu, to kill him. And that's exactly what he did. So Lumumba got his name from Patrice Lumumba, the freedom fighter in the Congo. Chokwe was a lawyer by trade. Matter of fact, he was cum laude at Wayne State University Law School when he graduated in 1975. But while he was there, he created something called the Malcolm X Center. But he also worked as a public defender in Detroit as well. He formed a law firm in the late 1970s where he defended like 16 prisoners who faced like murder charges after a riot in Pontiac, Illinois. And he took on some interesting cases. There was a Brinks bank robbery case where he defended the perpetrator, and he got the perpetrator at least a $500,000 bond. But many legal groups had kind of protested Lumumba and try to have his law license taken because of the fact that which many people kind of brought up as something problematic. He also worked on the Geronimo Pratt case, which was also worked on by Johnny Cochran, and he got Geronimo Pratt, who was the former head of the Black Panther Party in Los Angeles, who was unjustly jailed as well. And I believe he has a autobiography as well, because he wrote something before he had passed away, and I think I got it here somewhere. What is that? It's around here somewhere, because I remember I read it a couple of years ago. But it was interesting. It was an interesting case, that Geronimo Pratt case. So Lumumba was he went to Jackson, Mississippi, where he actually practiced law there, also as a public defendant. He also ran for the city council of Jackson, Mississippi, which he actually won. He became a councilman in 2009, but he also became mayor of Jackson, because he also ran for mayor of Jackson in 2013. And there were a lot of things that Jackson did, or he was planning on doing, in order to get the city of Jackson, on his feet, since it was in such, financial ruins. But unfortunately, he ended up dying in 2014. And the initial autopsy report never really revealed what he died from, but I think they said it was something about a heart attack or something like that. But he was like 60 something years old. So there was certain known circumstances in that case that they couldn't figure out. But apparently he ended up dead. Some people, conspiracy theorists, think that he was assassinated, which, might be plausible. But eventually his son, Chokwe Lumumba Jr., eventually ran for mayor of Jackson, and he eventually won. So he actually is currently the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. So I want to conclude with this because when we think about these stories, we think about, like, say, Katari Garden, the person that we recognize in this first Flea Day. We remember, like I said, these people. We remember the incidents of rebellions, resistance, ways that we have to fight the system, because sometimes there's just points in time where we realize that the system just can't be reformed. It has to be basically torn down and reconstructed again. It's like when you obtain a house and the foundations are so bad and so creaky, or whatever, that rebuilding the house will do you no good, because if you put up a wall and put up a roof and everything like that, and you don't rebuild the foundation, that house is going to crumble. And so me and many people who I've just mentioned in this particular presentation feel like the foundations is not strong enough. And you can put a new roof on a house all you want to, but if the foundation is not good, then it's going to fall. So in a sense, we have to understand what our task is. And sometimes a lot of us aren't tasked with the same, we're not tasked with the same thing. There are certain, like I said, in a war, there are certain fronts that we can fight on. I mean, I can handle a gun, but I'm not going to be one of the soldiers that's going to be on the front line. You know me, my voice and my writing are weapons within themselves. And I think a lot of people understand that. And, there are some street guys who are, who will be the soldiers, but we have to know what our role is in a revolution, in a fight, and play to those strengths. So when we're talking about Black August resistance, we're talking about discipline, because in a revolution, you're not going to win it unless you're disciplined enough to know when to fight and when not to fight, when to go against the enemy head up or do guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare has helped a lot of countries in wars where they, basically hit and run until, the enemy wears down. So hopefully I made enough impact on somebody who listened to this, and I guess that's it for me. Any questions?
No, thank you, Gardis. Thank you for breaking that down, and thank you for letting us know the different sections of Black August. And yes, I see the value of having a voice in a pen and paper for sure. It was something you taught me last year during Black August. I think it was. I hope I have it right. I'm sorry if you taught me this and I didn't remember it. But organization is the key. Like, it's not just, you can't move without the organization, without organizing it.
Yeah. Organization is going to be key because one, like, even though we always center certain revolutions around one person, those revolutions was never won by that one person. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, remember when I was talking about Dr. King, and, even though Dr. King is always mentioned as, the guy, the guy in the civil rights movement, it wasn't just him. It was several other people who were behind him, who helped him, who associated with him, and even people who, were antagonists and who ended up becoming, friendly with him, like Malcolm X. These were the people who lifted and helped Dr. King push forward the civil rights movement. And because without those people, the Medgar Eggers and the Fannie Lou Hamers and the Ella Bakers and all of Dr. King would have never done what he done without those people.
Agreed.
Where Jonathan Jackson attempted to kidnap the judge. And also too, we will try to do the days between August 7th and August 13th. We'll try to cover the Watts Rebellion, which was on August 11th, the Ferguson Rebellion, which was on August 10th, and also the birthday of Matulo Shakur, August 8th, who is the stepfather of the rapper Tupac Shakur.
Wow. Thank you so much for your wisdom and educating us as always, Gardis. You're so appreciated. Thank you. You have a great night. All right, y'all. So Gardis Watts, stop. It's important that we know that this exists for us. All right, you guys. Well, as they say, I guess I should have asked Gardis, does that mean the revolution will not be televised, as they say, right? You guys, also, I'll put the playlist up again. Where we had Gardis, he invited, or however we got, we were talking about the impact of Black people for Memorial Day, the contributions of Black Americans for Memorial Day. We also had Juneteenth discussion. We had the daily Boss Man Daily discussion with Big Mike as well. It's just so much you can find on this channel, more than just one commentary perspective. So thank you for joining us tonight. See you on August the 7th, and you take care of yourself and each other. All right, bye.